The storm had already settled over the city when the news broke. News so shocking that even the richest walls couldn't contain the whispers. A billionaire, a man known for his generosity, business brilliance, and quiet kindness, had been led away in handcuffs. Cameras flashed, reporters screamed his name, and strangers watched as if justice had finally found its target. But the truth, the real truth, was something no one dared ask. And the only person who sensed something was wrong was a woman no one ever noticed. Her name was Miriam. She worked quietly, cleaning floors and folding clothes in the billionaire's giant mansion, blending into the background of marble hallways and high ceilings. She never complained, never asked for more than what she had, and never imagined herself in the middle of a crisis involving one of the country's most powerful families. But sometimes the world chooses unlikely heroes, and on that night, while the world celebrated his downfall, Miriam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. She knew him, Mr. Roland Hale. Not the billionaire the news channels talked about, not the powerful CEO people envied, not the man people criticized for being too calculating or too private. She knew him as a father who knelt on the carpet to play blocks with his little boy, the man who always greeted her with a warm smile and asked about her day, the man whose eyes softened every time he looked at his child, 4-year-old Liam, the one person who brought laughter to that huge, echoing mansion. And that is why the sight of his arrest didn't make sense. Miriam had been in the living room, dusting the shelves, when men in suits stormed in, too sharp, too coordinated, too prepared. They didn't ask questions. They didn't hesitate. They walked straight toward Roland as if they had rehearsed it. And the moment they grabbed him, something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt, not shame, fear. A deep fear that shook Miriam to her core. Fear for his son. No one else saw it. They were too busy recording videos, snapping pictures, and spreading the story faster than anyone could control. Within minutes, the headline spread everywhere. Billionaire fraud scandal. Roland Hale's secret crimes exposed. Justice finally served. But Miriam kept replaying that single moment in her mind. The way he looked down the hallway toward the nursery. The way he tried to speak, but was silenced. The way he searched the room, almost begging someone to understand. And she did. Miriam stayed hidden behind the stairway until everyone left, taking Roland away in a convoy of flashing lights. When the mansion grew quiet once more, she felt something shift in the air. A heaviness. A warning. Liam's soft cry from the nursery broke the silence, like a tiny alarm only she could hear. She rushed upstairs, her heart pounding. Liam stood in his crib, rubbing his eyes with little fists, unaware of the chaos surrounding his small world. She lifted him gently, his warm cheek pressing against her shoulder. He kept repeating one word through his sniffles. Daddy. Her throat tightened. It's okay, baby. I'm here. But even as she whispered comfort, footsteps echoed from downstairs, slow, deliberate, unfamiliar. Someone was still in the house. Miriam froze. She held Liam close and pressed an ear to the nursery door. A quiet voice drifted upward, muffled, steady, talking on the phone. It didn't sound like security. It didn't sound like family. It sounded like someone who didn't belong there at all. She stepped back, her breath catching. She knew every guard's voice, every staff member, every relative who visited the Hale mansion. This voice belonged to none of them. Then the words traveled clearly through the stairwell. The kid is still here. Yes, I'll take care of it. Miriam's blood ran cold. Liam shifted nervously in her arms, sensing her fear. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She could barely breathe. All she knew was that someone downstairs was planning something terrible, and she was the only one standing between that threat and the innocent child trembling against her shoulder. She glanced around the nursery, searching for anything she could use. But there was nothing, just toys, soft blankets, and framed pictures of happier moments. Her eyes landed on the small emergency exit door, connected to an outdoor staircase that only the staff used during fire drills. She had never imagined she would need it for real. But tonight, she might. Silently, she walked toward it, every step slow and careful. Liam clung to her shirt, burying his face in her neck. She reached for the doorknob, praying it wouldn't squeak. But before she could open it, A loud thud echoed from downstairs, the sound of a door slamming shut. The unknown man was moving. Miriam swallowed hard. She had two choices: hide and hope he wouldn't come upstairs, or run and risk being heard. Neither choice felt safe. And yet, somewhere deep inside, she felt Roland's eyes again, the fear, the silent plea, the trust he placed in her without ever saying a word. He had looked toward the nursery because he knew something was coming. He knew someone was after his child. And he knew Miriam was the only one who would protect Liam when everyone else turned away. Her legs trembled, but her resolve didn't. She tightened her hold on the little boy. "It's okay," she whispered again, not to him this time, but to herself. The footsteps grew louder. A shadow moved along the wall at the bottom of the staircase, stretching slowly, like something reaching for them. Miriam's hand hovered over the exit door. She didn't know what waited outside. She didn't know who the man downstairs was. She didn't know why Roland had been framed, or who had the power to turn the whole world against him. She didn't understand any of it. Not yet. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. If she didn't leave right now, Liam wouldn't be safe. Her breath caught as the shadow began climbing the stairs, each step measured, confident, terrifying. And with her heart thundering loud enough to drown out the storm outside, she made her choice. She turned the handle. The door clicked, and the moment it opened, a gust of cold air rushed inside as the first edge of danger finally arrived, waiting just beyond the nursery door, as if daring her to make the next move. Cold air brushed against Miriam's face as she stepped onto the narrow metal staircase. Liam tucked tightly against her chest. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, but the wind was still sharp, carrying the smell of wet concrete and fear. She eased the door shut behind her, careful not to let it slam. The footsteps inside had reached the top of the stairs now. She could feel them through the wall, pounding faintly, getting closer. For one terrifying heartbeat, she imagined the man opening the nursery door and finding it empty. What would he do next? Search every room? Check the cameras? Call someone else? She swallowed hard and began moving down the steps. Each metal bar creaked under her feet, and she winced, praying the noise wouldn't echo inside. Liam clung to her silently, his tiny fingers curled into her shoulder, as if he understood everything without a single word spoken. At the bottom, Miriam paused, scanning the mansion's side yard. The tall hedges, usually manicured and beautiful, now looked like dark silhouettes lurking in the wet night. She had no plan, no idea where to go, no clue who was after this child, or why. All she had was instinct, and the memory of Roland's eyes when they dragged him away. That alone kept her legs moving. When she reached the edge of the yard, she ducked behind a hedge and crouched. The back of the mansion glowed with warm yellow lights, revealing everything. Too exposed. She couldn't stay there. She needed cover, distance, anything to keep Liam safe. Far behind the property, across a narrow service road, she spotted the small employee parking lot where her old car sat, barely holding itself together. It wasn't much, but it was the only thing she had. She waited, listening. The thunder had stopped. The city noises were muted, swallowed by the weight of night. But the mansion behind her, something felt wrong. A light flickered in the upstairs hallway. A shadow moved past the window. The man was searching, and he would soon figure out the child was gone. With a quiet breath, Miriam rose and hurried toward the lot. Mud splashed against her shoes as she moved, but she didn't stop. The closer she got, the more her nerves trembled. Every second felt borrowed, fragile. When she finally reached her car, she pulled the door open and gently placed Liam in the back seat, wrapping him in her jacket. His wide, confused eyes stared at her. "We're going somewhere safe, baby." "I promise," she whispered, though she wasn't sure where that place would be. She slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered once, twice, and then roared alive. Relief washed over her, but only for a moment. She pulled out of the lot, hands shaking, eyes bouncing between the road and the mansion, shrinking in her rear-view mirror. By the time she reached the main road, Liam had fallen asleep again, snuggled into her jacket. She tried to steady her breathing, but questions kept swirling in her mind. How could Roland Hale, A billionaire respected by so many, be accused of something so serious. How could such powerful people frame him so easily? And what did they want with his child? She remembered the man downstairs saying, "I'll take care of it." Those words kept replaying. They sounded cold, planned, as if this wasn't the first time he had done something like that. And Miriam wasn't naive. She had heard rumors among the staff. Whispers about corporate rivals, hidden deals, secret meetings, and people who disappeared after crossing the wrong line. Roland never talked about it, but she saw the way he locked his study every night, the way security tightened whenever he traveled, the way people in expensive suits sometimes argued quietly behind closed doors. But none of those whispers ever involved Liam. The little boy was innocent, loved, untouched by the world of money and danger that surrounded his father. That was why this situation felt unbearable. As she drove farther from the mansion, the roads grew darker and emptier. The rain returned, soft but persistent, tapping against the window. Her heart finally slowed enough for her to think clearly. She couldn't go home. If someone powerful enough to frame a billionaire was involved, they would find her easily. They would find anyone connected to Roland. She needed a place no one would expect, a place almost forgotten, her aunt's old rental house. It sat on the edge of the city, in a quiet neighborhood with cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights. No one visited. No one cared about that street. And Miriam still had the spare key on her keychain, though she hadn't stepped foot there in years. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. It wasn't perfect, but it would give her time to think. As she drove, flashes of her past filled her mind. Her childhood, her mother working 2 jobs, her father leaving when she was young. She grew up learning to protect herself, to keep going even when life didn't care. Maybe that was why she felt so much for little Liam. His innocence reminded her of everything she once wished she had. A safe home, a loving parent, a world that wasn't always cruel. Roland Hale had tried to give his son that kind of life. And now everything he built was collapsing. She blinked away her thoughts when her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her chest tightened. She glanced back at Liam. He was still asleep, then slowly reached the phone. A single message glowed on the screen. Unknown number. Where's the child? Her blood turned to ice. She dropped the phone onto the passenger seat, like it burned her fingers. They already knew. They knew Liam was missing. They knew someone had taken him. And somehow they had her number. She didn't know how they got it. And she didn't want to imagine what would happen if she answered. A second message popped up. "You have one chance, Miriam. Don't make this worse." Her hands tightened around the wheel as the car inched through a red light. They knew her name. That meant they knew her job, her routine, maybe even her family. But how? Had they been watching Roland long before tonight? Were they expecting her to intervene? Or were they simply prepared for anyone who protected the child? She didn't reply. She couldn't. Instead, she turned off her phone completely. Darkness filled the screen. The road ahead seemed to stretch forever. By the time she reached the old rental house, the neighborhood was silent. Only one street lamp flickered stubbornly, casting a dim glow over the cracked driveway. She parked the car and carried Liam inside, unlocking the door with a rusty key. The air was stale, dusty, forgotten, but it was shelter. She laid Liam on the old couch and pulled a blanket over him. He barely stirred. Watching him sleep in that small, silent room felt surreal. Hours ago, he had been safe in a warm mansion, protected by guards and comforted by his father's laughter. Now everything had changed. Miriam sat on the edge of the couch, hands trembling. She knew she needed answers. She needed to understand why Roland had been targeted. And she needed to know who the man was in the mansion. Her mind replayed everything she'd seen in the past few weeks. Strangers at the gate, urgent phone calls, Roland's tired eyes, and the folder he kept locked in his office drawer. She had seen him slip it inside every night. Thick, heavy, important. Could that folder be connected to all of this? Before she could think further, Liam shifted and whispered softly in his sleep, "Daddy." Miriam's heart broke. She didn't know how she was going to save this child. She didn't know how to protect herself. She didn't know how to fight people with power, influence, and dangerous intentions. But she knew one thing. Someone was already searching for them. And it was only a matter of time before they found this hiding place. Unless she acted first. The house felt too quiet, almost unnaturally so. Miriam sat on the edge of the couch, the dim light from the street lamp outside flickering through the window. Liam lay curled under the blanket, his breathing soft and steady, completely unaware of the danger waiting just beyond the dark. Miriam brushed a hand over her face, trying to think, try to slow her heartbeat, trying to make sense of everything. But the more she pieced things together, the more the fear inside her grew. Somewhere out there, someone with power wanted this child. Someone who had already destroyed Roland Hale's reputation overnight. Someone who had men inside the mansion, moving like they owned the place. Someone who had her phone number and her name. She didn't know how big this was, but every instinct in her warned her that she was fighting something far larger than she ever imagined. She stood quietly and walked to the small window. The street looked still. No cars passing, no people walking, nothing suspicious. But still, she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on her, watching, waiting. Behind her, Liam whimpered in his sleep. She turned, her heart softening. His tiny hands were clutching the blanket, his face tucked into it for comfort. Miriam knelt beside him. All the fear that had been clawing at her chest melted into something stronger, purpose. Protecting him wasn't a choice anymore. It was the only thing she could do. But to protect him, she needed to understand what was happening. And that meant she needed answers. Answers only one person could give. Roland. She thought back to the day before his arrest. She'd been dusting the bookshelves in his study when he rushed in, breathing hard, sweat on his brow. He locked the door behind him. Unaware she was still inside. She froze, hidden behind the tall leather chair. Roland went straight to the desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out that same thick folder she had seen him guard for weeks. He opened it, flipping through pages as if his life depended on it. "This can't be happening," he had whispered, voice full of dread. "Not now." Then someone knocked at the door, and Roland shoved the folder back into the drawer. She hadn't seen anything inside, but she had heard the fear in his voice. That folder held the truth. Now, the truth might be the only thing that could save them, but getting it meant going back to the mansion, and she knew the house was no longer safe. She sat back against the couch, her mind running through every possibility. There had been a few other employees in the mansion recently. People hired only weeks before Roland's arrest. A new security guard who barely spoke. A house manager who seemed too curious about Roland's private calls. A maintenance worker who wandered into restricted areas claiming he was just checking pipes. At the time, Miriam hadn't thought much about them. Staff came and went. In a house as big as Roland's, it wasn't unusual. But now it all seemed connected. Too timed. Too coordinated. What if they weren't just employees? What if they were placed there? A soft thud outside made her jump. She rushed to the window and looked out, but there was nothing, just the weak glow of the street lamp. Still, she double-checked the lock on the door. Every sound felt amplified. Every shadow stretched like a warning. She needed help, but who could she trust? The police were already against Roland, believing the story they had been fed. Calling them would only put Liam in more danger. Calling Roland's business partners? Impossible. Some of them might be involved. Friends? Associates? No. Everyone had turned their backs on Roland the moment the accusations surfaced. Miriam felt more alone than ever. Suddenly, her phone vibrated on the table. She had turned it off earlier, but she must have accidentally toggled the power when she threw it down. The screen lit up with a new message. Her breath caught. Unknown number. We know you're not far. You can still return the child. No one has to get hurt. Miriam's hand started shaking. She didn't reply. Didn't even pick up the phone. She didn't want them to know she'd seen it. She didn't want anything giving away her location. She powered off the phone again and removed the SIM card, placing it in a drawer far from the couch. Liam stirred again, whispering something she couldn't understand. Miriam sat beside him and smoothed his hair gently. The innocence of his face only deepened the fear in her. Someone wanted to take that innocence. Someone wanted to break Roland by tearing away the one thing he loved most. And someone believed she was an obstacle they could simply remove. Her thoughts drifted back to Roland's childhood stories, the ones he shared quietly while Liam played in the living room. Roland had grown up with nothing. No wealth. No privilege. He had worked his way up, sacrificing friendships, sleep, and almost his own health. Miriam remembered him saying once, "Success is louder than truth, and sometimes people use that noise to bury you." At the time, she didn't understand what he meant. Now, it felt like he had been warning her all along. The room felt too small, too exposed. She needed to secure the house. She checked the back door twice, then the windows. She closed the curtains tightly. She searched for anything she could use to keep the place safe. An old wooden chair she could push under the doorknob. A heavy vase she could place near the window frame. It wasn't much, but it made her feel slightly better. Once everything was set, she sat back on the couch and quietly planned. She had to go back to the mansion. She had to get that folder. Without it, she had no chance of understanding who framed Roland or why they wanted the child. But she couldn't leave Liam alone. Not even for a moment. She thought of someone, just one person she could possibly trust. Mrs. Clara Sanders, the retired teacher who lived 2 streets away. Clara had known Miriam's mother, had seen Miriam grow up, and had always looked out for her in a gentle, quiet way. She didn't gossip. She didn't judge. And she didn't owe anything to the Hale family or anyone connected to them. Maybe she would help. But the risk was enormous. If anyone followed Miriam here, Clara could get pulled into the danger. A sudden noise outside made her freeze again. A low rumble, like a car engine passing slowly. It didn't speed up. It didn't fade away. It lingered, humming softly, too close for comfort. She stepped to the window, but stayed hidden behind the curtain. Peeking through a thin gap, a dark vehicle sat halfway down the street. No lights on. No movement. Her stomach dropped. Someone had found the neighborhood. She backed away from the window, careful not to make a sound. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She looked at the small house around her. No back exit, no second door, no place to hide. And Liam, innocent, sleeping Liam, was right there on the couch, completely vulnerable. Miriam felt the world tighten around her, shrinking the walls, pulling the air from her lungs. She didn't know who was in that car. She didn't know if they had seen her. She didn't know how long they had been searching. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. They were getting closer, and time was running out. The dark vehicle didn't move. It just sat there like a silent warning, its shape blending into shadows, as if watching, waiting for the right second to strike. Miriam pressed her back against the wall, trying to calm the panic clawing at her throat. She forced herself to breathe slowly. She couldn't let fear take over. Not now. Not when Liam was depending on her. She glanced at the little boy sleeping on the couch. He looked peaceful, unaware of the dangers circling them like wolves. Every instinct in her screamed to grab him and run. But where? The streets were empty, and the car outside wasn't parked by accident. Someone had followed them. Someone had narrowed down their hiding places. And someone was patient enough to wait in the dark for her next move. Miriam crouched and peeked through the curtains again. The car still hadn't moved. No doors opened. No headlights flashed. It was a stillness that unnerved her, the kind of stillness that made the night feel too long and too quiet. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it. If they knew she had Liam, why hadn't they come to the door already? Why hadn't they tried to break in? The only explanation she could think of was that they weren't sure she was inside. They were watching, observing. Maybe they wanted to see if someone else would show up. Maybe they were waiting to see if she'd panic and run, giving away her direction. She swallowed hard. She couldn't stay inside this dusty old house forever. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, and every minute she stayed made the risk even greater. She needed to get that folder from the mansion before they found proof she had taken Liam. If the enemy got to it first, everything Roland had sacrificed would disappear into the shadows with no one able to clear his name. But the problem was simple and terrifying. Stepping outside meant walking straight into danger. Her thoughts drifted again to Roland. How calm he always seemed. How steady. Even when things were falling apart at the company, he never lost control. She remembered the last conversation she overheard between him and someone on the phone. His voice had been firm, tired, maybe even scared, though he tried to hide it. "They're closing in," he had said, "but I won't hand anything over. Not without exposing what they've done." Those words replayed in her mind like pieces of a puzzle. She was just beginning to understand. Roland hadn't been arrested because of a mistake. He'd been taken down because he was about to reveal something dangerous. Something about powerful men who didn't want the truth coming out. Something connected to that folder. Miriam rubbed her arms, trying to stop the tremble. She wished she had paid attention sooner. She wished she had asked Roland what he was worried about instead of assuming it was business pressure. Now she was trapped in a situation far bigger than she ever imagined. A soft rustle came from the couch. Liam blinked awake, his eyes glassy with sleep. He looked around, confused. "Where's Daddy?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Miriam's heart tightened. She sat beside him and stroked his back gently. "He's okay," she whispered, because she couldn't bring herself to say anything else. "We're just staying somewhere safe for tonight." He nodded, trusted her completely. That trust felt heavier than the danger outside. A sudden buzzing sound startled her, her phone lighting up even without the SIM card inside. It wasn't a message. It was a notification from a nearby wireless network trying to connect. That meant someone close by was running digital sweeps, scanning for signals. Her blood ran cold. They weren't just watching the street. They were checking for devices inside houses, too. If anyone detected her phone, even briefly, they'd know exactly which house she was in. She snatched it off the table and shoved it deep under the cushions, then pulled Liam to her side. "I need you to stay very quiet for a moment, okay?" He nodded again, sensing the seriousness in her voice. Miriam listened intently, her breath caught in her throat. At first, there was nothing, just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the distant drip of rain outside. But then she heard it, a faint crunch of gravel. Slow, heavy, purposeful. Someone was outside. Her heart pounded as she moved Liam to a corner behind the couch, shielding him with a blanket for warmth. She whispered softly, "Stay here. Don't move unless I tell you." She took a step toward the window, keeping her body low. The crunching grew sharper, closer. She lifted the edge of the curtain inch by inch. A shadow passed across the street lamp's dim light. Not from the car. This was separate. A person, tall, broad shoulders, moving slowly along the sidewalk like someone checking each house. Miriam froze. He reached the edge of the driveway and stopped. Her house. He was looking at her house. Her chest tightened painfully. She backed away, hand trembling, reaching for anything she could use. Her fingers brushed against an old wooden broom leaning in the corner, a ridiculous thing to defend herself with, but it was all she had. The man outside didn't knock. He didn't call out. He just stood there, his face hidden under a hood, as if listening for movement inside. Then he stepped closer. Miriam held her breath, her body stiff. Liam whimpered softly, and she pressed a finger to her lips, begging him silently not to make a sound. The door handle moved. Just once. A slow twist, testing it. Miriam's knees nearly gave out. She clutched the broom tighter, praying the old locker Anne installed years ago would hold. The man tried again, twisting harder this time. The lock rattled but didn't give. After a long moment, the handle released. Silence followed. Heavy, suffocating. She dared to step forward and peek through the curtain again. The man wasn't walking away. Instead, he returned to the car and slipped inside. The engine turned on without headlights, and the vehicle rolled backward, parking even farther from the street lamp, creating a darker shadow, making it impossible to see who was inside. Miriam felt a wave of cold dread spread across her skin. They weren't leaving. They were settling in, watching, waiting. She knew then that the old house was no longer even remotely safe. She needed a way out. She needed someone who knew more than she did. Someone who could help her reach Roland, even if he was locked away. Someone who understood how to deal with threats like this. Her thoughts landed on the last person Roland seemed to trust before his arrest, his quiet, soft-spoken accountant, Mr. Levon Briggs. The one who always showed up early, stayed late, and kept his head down. The one who warned Roland once. Be careful who you push against. Some people move in shadows. Maybe he knew more. Maybe he had a piece of the truth. But reaching him would be dangerous. He lived across town, far from here. The roads were dark, and the car outside was waiting for her to make a move. Every path was a trap. Every second ticked louder. She looked at Liam again, curled under blanket, unaware of how close danger had come. Protecting him was becoming harder by the minute. The walls felt thinner, the silence heavier, and the night darker. Somewhere outside, the hum of the engine faded for a moment, then returned, almost as if the driver shifted positions or adjusted something. Miriam felt the moment tightening, building like a storm ready to break. She knew a choice was coming, one that could save them or destroy everything, and there was no turning back now. Everything froze for a moment after that loud knock, as if the entire house was holding its breath. Evelyn slowly stepped back from the door, her fingers trembling, while Mr. Archer exchanged a tense glance with Liam. The twins huddled closer together, sensing something was wrong even though no one had said a word. The uneasy silence stretched on, broken only by the faint hum of the hallway light. When the second knock came, softer this time, almost hesitant, it sent a cold ripple through the room. Mr. Archer finally moved toward the door, but before he could reach it, his phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message appeared, this one even more unsettling than the first. It warned him not to trust anyone inside the house, and said someone he believed was innocent had been hiding a secret for years. The timing was too perfect. It deepened the fear already creeping in from every corner of the mansion. Evelyn swallowed hard, stepping back as if the message was pointed straight at her, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that someone else in the house was being accused, someone they hadn't even thought about. Then, almost on cue, a faint sound echoed from upstairs. It wasn't loud, but it was out of place, like a small thud, followed by the soft shuffle of feet. The twins instantly clung to each other. Evelyn's face went pale. Mr. Archer turned slowly toward the staircase, his heartbeat quickening. No one was supposed to be upstairs. Everyone had been accounted for, or at least that's what they thought. Officer Daniels exchanged a look with Officer Mira, both sensing that the situation had just shifted from strange to dangerous. They moved silently toward the base of the stairs, their hands steady but their expressions tense, listening carefully. The air felt heavier with each passing second. Liam's pulse hammered his ears. The earlier message, the locked door, the knocking, now footsteps upstairs. Nothing matched, yet everything seemed connected, as if some invisible thread was pulling events tighter and tighter. Suddenly, another message flashed on Mr. Archer's screen, this time including a picture taken inside the house. The angle was strange, low, as if someone was hiding behind furniture or a doorway. The picture showed the upstairs hallway and a blurred silhouette of someone standing near the twins' room. Mr. Archer's breath caught. The officer stiffened. Evelyn covered her mouth, her eyes filling with fear. But the most shocking part wasn't the silhouette. It was a faint reflection in the hallway mirror. It showed a second figure standing behind the first, someone they couldn't identify. The tension in the room thickened. Officers Daniels and Mira quickly signaled everyone to stay close while they slowly advanced toward the stairs. Every step echoed like a warning. Liam kept glancing at the twins, who were trembling but trying to stay brave. Mr. Archer stood protectively beside them, even as worry pressed deep into his chest. Another soft shuffle sounded from above, followed by the quiet clicking noise, as if a door was being pushed open or gently closed. Just when Officer Daniels placed his foot on the first step, another message came through, this time with one chilling sentence that made everyone's blood run cold. "You're looking in the wrong direction." Everyone froze. All eyes instinctively swung away from the staircase and toward the darkened hallway at the back of the mansion, the one they had passed earlier but hadn't thought twice about. A place no one had checked. A place someone could easily hide without being seen. And it was in that suspended moment, with all attention shifting at once, that a faint creak sounded from behind the hallway door, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone quietly breathing on the other side, as if waiting for the right moment to step out. The real danger wasn't upstairs. It was already here, much closer than anyone had realized. Officer Daniels took a slow step toward the dark hallway, raising a hand for everyone to stay back. The breathing behind the door grew steadier, almost controlled, like the person hiding there wanted them to hear it. Evelyn held the twins close, her hands trembling, while Mr. Archer pulled Liam behind him protectively. The soft hum of the hallway light seemed louder now, filling the mansion with a tension that made every second feel heavier than the last. Officer Mira positioned herself beside Daniels, their eyes locked on the narrow door, as if it held all the answers they'd been searching for since the chaos began. When Daniels finally pushed it open, the room inside was barely lit, just enough to reveal the outline of a figure standing by the far wall. The person lifted their hand slowly, not in threat, but in surrender. For a moment, no one recognized them, until the figure stepped forward and the dim light caught their face. It was Mrs. Hargrove, the former housekeeper who had been dismissed weeks ago under mysterious circumstances. Her eyes were tired but sharp, watching everyone carefully as if she had been expecting this moment. Before anyone could speak, she pointed to the corner of the room where an old security panel blinked with a faint red light. She whispered that someone had been tapping into the mansion's internal cameras, feeding Mr. Archer the fear-inducing messages. She claimed she had come back not to harm anyone, but to expose the person behind everything. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Her story sounded unbelievable, yet the panic in her voice felt real. Mr. Archer stepped closer, demanding to know who was responsible. Mrs. Hargrove hesitated before revealing a name that stunned everyone. His former business partner, a man who had been quietly holding a grudge since losing everything after a failed investment. According to her, he had been inside the house earlier, accessing hidden wiring and leaving coded messages to make it seem like someone inside was a threat. The silhouette in the upstairs photo wasn't a stranger. It was a decoy placed by him before slipping out unnoticed. Just as everyone began to process her words, a sudden alert beeped from Officer Myra's radio. A motion sensor at the back exit had been triggered. Daniels and Mira rushed out, with Mr. Archer close behind them. They reached the doorway just in time to see a shadowy figure running toward the back fence. Daniels shouted for him to stop, but the man kept moving, desperate to escape. Mira managed to cut him off, cornering him near the storage shed. When they finally apprehended him, he turned out to be exactly who Mrs. Hargrove had named, the ex-partner who had tried to scare the family into abandoning the house so he could take back what he believed was his. The tension in the air finally began to loosen as they walked him back inside. The truth was out, the danger contained. Evelyn sank onto the couch, holding the twins tightly as relief washed over her. Liam leaned against his father, letting out a breath he felt he'd been holding for hours. It seemed like everything had finally been resolved. But just when the room began to settle, Mrs. Hargrove stepped out from the hallway, her expression suddenly different, calmer, almost relieved. She looked at Mr. Archer and confessed softly that she hadn't told him everything. The messages, the fear, the perfectly timed warnings she admitted she had been helping, not to hurt them, but to force Mr. Archer to face the truth about the man he still trusted before it was too late. She had seen signs for months and tried to warn him, but when he wouldn't listen, she took matters into her own hands. Everyone went silent. It turned out there were two people working behind the scenes, one to deceive and one to protect. The final twist wasn't the villain they caught outside. It was the unlikely protector who had been hiding in the shadows, trying to save the family in the only way she knew how. And as the officers escorted the man away, Mr. Archer met Mrs. Hargrove's eyes with a mixture of shock, gratitude, and the realization that sometimes the people you push away end up being the ones who stand closest when danger comes. The house felt strangely quiet after everything that happened, as if the walls themselves were finally allowed to breathe again. Mr. Archer stood in the center of the living room, taking in the space that had become a battlefield of fear, suspicion, and unexpected truth. Evelyn sat on the couch with the twins curled against her, their little faces peaceful now that the danger had passed. Liam hovered nearby, still shaken but calmer than before, watching his father with a mixture of relief and confusion. For the first time in hours, there was no distant whisper, no sudden noise, no chilling message hidden in the walls. Just silence, and the weight of everything that had come to light. Officer Daniels finished speaking quietly with the last of his team before walking over to Mr. Archer. His tone softened as he explained that the former partner had already admitted to entering the mansion more than once, taking advantage of old wiring routes and hidden panels from a past renovation. He had planned the entire scheme carefully, hoping that fear would break the family apart and lead them to abandon the property. The officers were gathering every piece of evidence now, and they were certain the courts would handle the rest. Mr. Archer nodded slowly, but he barely heard the details. His eyes kept drifting to Mrs. Hargrove, who stood near the staircase with her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She looked smaller now, not because of guilt, but because she was finally letting go of the burden she carried alone. She met his gaze once, then looked away, as if she wasn't sure whether she was allowed to feel relief yet. Evelyn encouraged her gently to come closer, and when Mrs. Hargrove stepped into the living room, the twins instantly recognized her and called her name. Their innocent joy softened the atmosphere even further. She knelt beside them, brushing a hand over their hair, whispering apologies for scaring them even though she had only meant to protect them. Evelyn placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, letting her know she didn't blame her at all. But Mr. Archer took a moment before he spoke. He approached slowly, feeling the weight of the past weeks, the arguments, the misunderstandings, the distance he'd allowed to grow between himself and the people who had once felt like family. He thanked her quietly, genuinely, for saving him from a threat he had refused to see. She hesitated at first, her eyes filling with tears she tried to hide, but then she nodded, accepting the gratitude she never thought she'd hear again. Officer Mira soon joined them, carrying a small folder the officers had collected. Inside were copies of the messages, photographs of the planted shadow in the hallway, and details of the hidden camera feeds. She explained how the former partner had tried to manipulate every corner of their lives, hoping that fear and confusion would push the billionaire into making desperate decisions. The discovery of the truth meant the family could finally move forward without looking over their shoulders. She reminded them to secure the home, to stay alert, but also to rest now because the worst was over. When the officers finally left, taking the suspect with them, the mansion seemed bigger than before. It no longer pressed inward with fear. Instead, it felt like a place ready to be rebuilt, emotionally as much as physically. Evelyn brought everyone warm tea, trying to restore a sense of normalcy. The twins, still buzzing with leftover energy, ran around the room giggling, unaware of how close they had come to danger. Liam sat next to Mrs. Hargrove, asking her questions with that gentle curiosity he always had. She answered each one with patience, as if she had missed these simple moments more than she dared to say. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, Mr. Archer walked Mrs. Hargrove to the front door. He struggled to find the right words, but she saved him from trying too hard. She told him she had acted out of loyalty, not to the mansion, not to the money, but to the family she spent years caring for. She knew something was wrong long before anyone else did, and when no one listened, she believed she had no choice but to force the truth into the open. Her methods were unconventional, even frightening at times, but her intentions were rooted in the same kindness she had always shown. He asked her to stay, not as someone hiding in shadows, not as someone dismissed without explanation, but as part of the home again. She looked surprised, emotional, but she politely declined, at least for now. She said she needed time to rest, to breathe, to let the fear of the past finally fade, but she promised she wasn't leaving forever. When she felt ready, she would return and the house would feel complete again. In the days that followed, the mansion slowly returned to life. Security crews fixed the wiring, sealed off the hidden panels, and updated every camera. Evelyn spent more time in the garden with the twins, letting them paint rocks and chase butterflies. Liam grew curious about the old rooms and helped his father explore the parts of the mansion they had ignored for years. And Mr. Archer, humbled by the ordeal, began reconnecting with everyone he had pushed away. His perspective shifted. Wealth and power had once defined his world, but now he understood that loyalty, trust, and human kindness mattered far more. News reporters eventually learned about the incident, and though the story gained attention because of the billionaire's status, Mr. Archer made sure to highlight the bravery of Mrs. Hargrove and the dedication of the officers. He wanted people to know that the real heroes weren't the ones with money or titles. They were the ones who acted out of love and courage when no one else was watching. One evening, About a week later, a small envelope appeared at the front gate. It had no name, just a simple message written in neat handwriting. "Take care of them until I return." Inside was a tiny bracelet the twins had once given Mrs. Hargrove as a playful gift. Evelyn smiled softly when she read it, and Mr. Archer tucked the note safely into a drawer. Life moved forward, but the lessons lingered. Their home had been shaken by betrayal, fear, and manipulation, yet was saved by loyalty, bravery, and unexpected kindness. The billionaire who once believed he could handle everything alone now understood that even the strongest walls mean nothing without people you trust beside you. And somewhere, in a quiet place far from the chaos, Mrs. Hargrove rested with a lighter heart, knowing that the family she protected was safe, wiser, and finally able to live without the shadows that once haunted their nights.